Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation on how to predict the future of media consumption by tapping into generational differences. I'm Gavin Bridge, Senior Media Analyst at Variety, and I'm joined by Alex Frankel Schoor. Alex, let's hear about yourself.
Hi there, I'm Alex. I am the head of customer success here at getWizer. If you haven't worked with us before, getWizer is a market research startup that is bringing automation, technology, and even artificial intelligence to the end-to-end market research process.
And I will go on record, getWizer are great because we partnered up together to do the study that you're going to see the results from today. We published the results of it at Variety Intelligence Platform under the project title of The Demographic Divide. But we really did a fantastic look at how markets are being divided. TV, music, video games, social, even attitudes to data privacy and big tech and social and stuff like that. And we did it together, and you're going to see the results from it today.
Diving into our presentation, how do you predict the future? We do not have a crystal ball over here, but the future is actually already here. It's just not evenly distributed. The way that we're going to predict the future is by tapping into generational differences, looking at younger age groups versus older age groups to see the trends in media consumption. Gavin, I thought the way that you split the age groups was really smart. Can you go into that?
Yeah, so you know how everyone really talks about Gen Z, Millennial, Gen X, Baby Boomers, and I thought being an older millennial and knowing some younger millennials, there's not a lot of similarities between myself and say even like my sister-in-law who's 10 years younger than me. So I thought about why don't we look at age groups by sort of life stage that you'll be in. So we looked at it instead of dividing it up by these just like arbitrary definitions that are the standard these days. We looked at 15 to 29s, who I believe are really the first generation to be digital natives, 30 to 44s, who are that group who grew up analog but then went digital when they were probably in their teens. I think everyone there would have been in their teens. Then 45 to 59s, sort of more analog, and then 60 plus, even more analog. Just to put it very short, succinctly. But that also gave us a wonderful benefit of every age group being 15 years in scope. So we have a very fair, rather than 60 plus, we have a very fair way of looking at the data here.
Yeah, absolutely. So diving into TV and streaming, across those four age breaks, we can see, if you look at the TV icon, traditional TV, broadcasting, cable, how dominant that is among the 60 plus group. That's a go-to source for viewing shows and movies for 60 plus. And then you can see the decline among the middle age groups, and it's almost non-existent among the 15 to 29-year-olds. And my kids, who are even younger, like they don't even know what broadcast or cable even is. There's just that a sheer dominance of streaming. So I think, we sort of see how TV is dying and streaming has taken over. But I want to also talk about the future, right? Like streaming is the present, but what's the future? So I thought this was fascinating. And we did this. This is your favorite form of entertainment. You've got watching shows, watching movies, watching sports, and watching news at the bottom, and then other forms of entertainment at the top. And you can see that not only are the younger generations moving from traditional TV over to streaming, but their eyeballs are moving away from viewing in general towards other platforms. They're still consuming content, but they're consuming it in very different ways. And so this is actually just free streaming, huge dominance of YouTube. But we also see that within the younger age groups, social platforms and gaming platforms are gaining an edge here. So you can even see from the slide prior that, that's where viewing is migrating towards. It's towards social platforms, towards video game platforms, which brings us nicely to the next topic of social audio and gaming. So here you can see the exact same chart, but here highlighting those who use social media, listen to music and podcasts, and play video games across the 4 different age breaks. And diving into where viewing is migrating, so just on social platforms, just as an example, and we have so many examples, but our marketing team has asked us to cut this down to a manageable format. But just on social media alone, you can see this is those who use social media for news. And then in the darker color, those who only use social media for news, which I thought is so crazy. Like over half of the youngest age group is using social media for use, and a quarter of them are only using social media for use and not going to any other source. Not going.
The interesting thing with that, I think, Alex, as well, is it doesn't mean if you're a local news channel or someone, you don't lose access to these people. You just have to go to where they are, right? And
yeah, definitely.
It is kind of frightening from our perspective of like you only rely on social because of all the misinformation, but it can be something that changes over time. So it's just the platforms are very different for reaching people these days.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much more fragmentation. You need to be able to reach people across different platforms and on different sources. Same with audio and the prevalence of podcasts these days. You know, it might have been in the past that a topic you were very interested in, you would watch a show or a documentary on that topic on TV. Now, you know, in this middle group of podcasts are a key part of my entertainment mix. And again, you see among the younger generations, that's much stronger than it is for the older generations.
I wonder too if podcasts are the new satellite talk radio, because that was like, I was just thinking to myself, like, what could you listen to before audiobooks and before podcasts, like the digital revolution? And it was literally just like you could find a talk radio station that had stuff that you were interested in. So
right.
It would be interesting to see if, like, I don't even know how we could do it, but if a similar proportion of people have always listened to some sort of audio that isn't music, and if it's just shifting, maybe we could get into that in a future study.
Definitely. So much to explore here. And in terms of the last segment of gaming, here what the data shows is this is the proportion of people who think that video games are more entertaining than watching shows and movies. And I think it's amazing. It's almost 40% among the younger age group versus 8%. And I think we see this across other metrics as well, of the younger age groups craving more interactive types of entertainment versus the more passive viewing.
It's definitely weird when you think like our generation, maybe because we grew up with like Super Nintendos or whatever, and it wasn't quite as immersive, that gaming was, you could get lost in a game, but it was sort of something you did alongside other forms of entertainment. Whereas it feels like nowadays people are literally like, no, gaming does everything I want, and that's it. You know, I don't really care about anything else, which is a very interesting shift in perception.
Definitely. Not shown here, we also had a data point on augmented reality, and we see a similar break that we see here for this gaming cut, where the younger generation is very much into augmented reality versus the older generation who barely experiences that at all. Okay, so moving on to the platforms that are being used. We do see a sheer dominance of Facebook, but if you look at the data, these are sized proportionally. It's much more dominant among the middle age groups, and it's actually not so prevalent among 15 to 29-year-olds age group. They are using Instagram slightly more than Facebook. They're still using Facebook, using Instagram more. Of course, Facebook owns Instagram, now Meta. But they're also using other platforms. They're also using more platforms than the older age groups, more social platforms in general. TikTok and Snapchat are clearly gaining momentum, gaining dominance among this age group. And we do see in general that the younger age groups are gravitating more towards video and picture content versus word-based.
What I find interesting here is you can see each time a different age group kind of becomes of age, they move to another platform, right?
Yeah.
Like TikTok came out, became very so. And it happens very quickly. It's not quite like even here, 15 to 29s. If we could chop it into little bits, you'd find out the younger ones are more probably in TikTok, and the slightly older ones are in Snapchat. So I feel like if you're a social network, you've really got to constantly innovate. Otherwise, someone's just going to come along in another couple of years and just eat your lunch from the next generation. It's like a very interesting, hyper competitive landscape in terms of business here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of the reason for the dominance of social networks in general, and for more short form video content, because we've seen that, people gravitating more from, especially in the younger generations, from long form to shorter form content over time and over the years. And I think part of that is because of attention span. It used to be back in 2012, the human attention span was at 12 seconds, which is just more than that of a goldfish. Now we're at 8 seconds, which is less than that of a goldfish at 9. And I think that was done a few years ago. Now it's probably even lower than that.
Yeah, it's shocking, but it explains the lack of interest in longer form content, especially maybe not lack of interest overall, but ranking it as one of your top forms of entertainment, because you have to really sit down and commit to some of these things. And if you're finding yourself driven to your phone and you're watching like a very heavy drama that you need to follow intricate plot lines for, that entertainment form isn't necessarily going to work for you. And you contrast that with, say, like a video game where there's constant action because you're in control of it. That is always keeping your attention span, right? Because it's like flashing lights and action and just all sorts of things to keep you involved. So I think you've got a very good sort of example of this point within those studies that we've done.
Yeah, exactly. And now, partly to your point before, Gavin, about different audio sources, we see, we could almost swap this slide out for the TV slide. I'd swap FM media for the little television set and swap Spotify for Netflix. We see the exact same story here with sort of radio dying out, dominance of other streaming platforms.
Well, there's a pattern too, right? With all of the slides we've seen where we've done the formats, social and free streaming and general videos like TV and video streaming and now audio, is that there's a much greater degree of fluidity the younger you get, in terms of like you have a much wider range of sources, right? Whereas people over 60 are very much creatures of habit. Not everyone is, you do have some mavericks within that age group who will adopt and be a bit more fluid, but you sort of see this pattern forever, and just it's a very interesting time to be, I guess, a marketer, because if you're trying to reach the 60 plus, it's relatively easy. They're still watching or listening to one or two things. Reaching younger people, it requires a greater deal of complexity because they're just on so many things. And if even on this, right, I think what was it, like the average number of audio sources was like 4 or 5, I think, for 15 to 29s. So they're not even just listening to one. They just pick and choose it, going here and there. Like SoundCloud has different artists to, say, Apple Music or Amazon Music. If people are using Pandora, you can find different things. FM radio is different again. Like there's different experiences. YouTube's got videos. I remember seeing from the data too, like how important music videos were among younger people. So you've really got to struggle to reach these people in a way. Like you can find them, but like they're just using, in every format that we see, so many different. They don't just have like one or two favorite sources.
Completely. Yeah, they're looking for more choice in general. They have so many more sources, and they're used to that. So they're sort of born into a world that had almost endless choice, whereas the 60 plus were born into a world where there was only one form of entertainment that was the go-to, right?
Yeah, but also to me, I don't know what you think on this, but it sort of suggests the end of brand loyalty. Right, if you might have a very plastic definition of loyalty where there's like 6 different services you'll consider, and maybe on a particular day you'll go to one of them. But brand loyalty, like it used to be, I don't think it exists anymore among younger people.
That's such a good point. Last slide here that we want to present to you guys is about gaming. And again, we're looking at the sources here, and just the same story as before, right? Like the younger groups are using more gaming sources, but we do see this just sheer dominance of mobile, even across all generations. Gavin, thoughts on the gaming?
Yeah, I mean, mobile it's come a long way since Candy Crush. I mean, that's still very big because you like see Doja Cat doing ads for it for tournaments on television. So it's just insane the amount of money that Candy Crush is making. But graphic wise, you can do a lot more on a phone. The screens are bigger, and I think with we see cloud gaming really taking off in the next couple of years with server speeds pick up. There's really no reason for some people to have a console anymore. You could just get a cloud service from, like, say, Xbox Live or something like that, and PlayStation has one, which will surely be upgraded. Switch, Nintendo is hard to say because they're very guarded on. They try and sell hardware, more frequent, or like they really have a focus on it. But yeah, like you just see, it's just easy. It's the same thing as I think anything else among younger people. You pick up a phone. It's already there, right? You don't have to do something else. You don't have to plug in. You don't got to turn something else on. You've got the entertainment format here. It's something I think we'll just see keep growing.
Exactly. I also think, the phone is something you carry with you everywhere you go. You don't have to be at your home or different location where you happen to have one of these devices. You could be on the go. Okay, so I was at Adweek a couple weeks ago now, and all of the CMOs and the marketers and the advertisers were sort of talking about this state of crisis. The CMO of MasterCard was saying that because of fragmentation, there are so many sources for marketers to go to, and we're seeing that here. And there's so much new technology. There's so many different sources, and this notion of crisis came up. But my colleague Lucy, who actually did the calligraphy on here, was telling me that the Chinese word for crisis is made up of these two characters. And the first represents danger. That's the character Wei. The next character, Ji, represents opportunity. So where there is danger, there is also opportunity. And it just depends on your ability to manage the crisis. And so, yes, traditional mediums are dying. And yes, there's endless fragmentation. But there's also opportunity if we tap into what these younger generations are looking for, which, as we've seen, more choice, more short form content, more interactivity, more diversity. Didn't show the chart here, but when we ask people if they specifically seek out content that's diverse, it was about 30% among the younger generations, and half of that for the older generations. And so as we become a more diverse society, right? If you look at census data, we are becoming more diverse as a nation. People are seeking out more and more diverse content. And I think the strategies that tap into these opportunities are the ones that are going to win. Gavin, did you have thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it is a danger for traditional mediums, right? So you think like newspapers, TV, FM radio. The old method used to be, to quote Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. Maybe it wasn't Kevin Costner, it was the ghosts, but the concept is there. That was basically how media worked. Nowadays, it's more, if you put it where I am, I might watch it, but I'm not going out of my way unless it's something incredible. Like there's a lot of buzz around it. Like you can't rely on your brand anymore to be this magnet just to kind of draw people in, unless you're one of the very few lucky brands out there. Let's say like the NFL or something like that, like being a mega brand. But with that, yeah, there's tons of opportunities. It gives you, you just first of all had to be forward thinking and try and embrace all these different new platforms coming out. But equally, in terms of reaching people, yes, it is no longer a simple case of just calling someone up and being like, buy me 8 p.m. on CBS and I've reached my audience. You might need to have more staff, but you can actually really pinpoint, a fragmented audience down to your level now. You just have to do it through about 20 different sources, whereas before you might have had to have one or two.
Right. Completely. I also think there's a lot of opportunity, not only for advertisers, but also for media companies that are devising the content, right? Because we see, if viewing is decreasing, but we also see people want more interactivity, more choice, more short form content, more diversity. You can tap into that. What about, choose your own adventure TV show or movie where you're deciding what the character does next? What about quality productions of shorter form content, 5 to 15 minutes long, but with solid acting, with solid storylines? What about, NFTs for exclusive content, or interacting with characters online, or even bringing augmented reality into it where you are, interacting directly with the characters in the production itself? There are a lot of creative ideas that people can tap into, by leveraging some of this data, creating
Yeah, I feel like
yeah, go.
I feel like when let's say we do this study, keep going on, and in like 5 years' time, when the metaverse is really established,
Yeah.
we'll be having a totally different conversation, because you'll be able to literally just go on in and interact with more like cartoon graphics, probably not necessarily like real life, unless we can really get deep fake technology going, but in a positive way. But the way that we'll engage, will be totally different again. We'll see a new generation coming up who are the metaverse generation, which is a frightening thought already.
Yeah.
But it's going to totally turn things on its head once again. So it's not to say, right now we have a view of what the common behaviors will be in, mass adoption in the next 5 to 10 years will be what we're seeing younger people do, a wider spread of different formats, not a reliance on traditional. But there's going to be a serious play again to upend the new world order, which is just taken over, and that's going to be turned on its head unless people are very smart and invest accordingly, in these new technologies that are already coming up.
Absolutely. And as people interact in the metaverse, um, yeah, it will be an amazing world. I think these key themes show up there as well, right? It's completely interactive, it's short form, it will be more diverse, there will be more choice. I think these themes are sort of the diving board, even for the metaverse.
It just shows you sort of things like Quibi were probably ahead of their time, maybe not with their target audience, but necessarily the actual format itself. It wasn't, COVID or not, it wasn't the right time. It was like it needed the technology to catch up.
Yeah, agreed. Well, that is a wrap on the future of media. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you.
Yep. Thank you very much.